Hello everyone, welcome to another very exciting tutorial. Today we're going to continue our carousel series. This episode is going to be building one type of carousel where you have multiple elements visible in the page. In the previous episodes of our carousel series, which I will put the link down in the description, we only had one element visible, and then by pressing next or previous, you could basically maneuver between those elements. Um, so by the way, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please go ahead and do. So today we're going to build this. So we're going to have a carousel with multiple elements visible, and when you press next, it's going to go to the next couple of elements, and then if you press previous, it's going to go back. Today we're going to be building the markup, basically HTML and CSS, and in the next part we're going to add the interactions. So without any further ado, let's get started. As always, I go to Kotus.com, front end, and then Codenes Online Editor. Let me show you some of the examples on websites. For example, if you go to google.com and search for movies, for example, on a specific year, you have these pretty cool carousel up there that shows you the list of movies. Or if you go, for example, to Udemy website, you will see that they also have carousels with the list of the courses that they have. So this is a pretty good example of carousel that you can use in your projects. So let's get started. What I'm going to do, I'm going to create a carousel container, a div with the class carousel container, and then within that, I'm going to put a div with class track. And I'm going to tell you exactly, if you have followed our carousel series, you have seen this many times, but for now, this is going to be the container of all the elements, for example, that we have over here. So the next thing I want to do is I want inside the track, I want to put, let's imagine these are cards, right? And each card has, for example, an image that you can apply as a background and it has some sort of a title. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a class called card container, and within that, I'm gonna put a card, right? So this is gonna be this card container. We're gonna just duplicate it many times to represent the elements that are visible in our carousel. So just to style it a little bit, I'm going to say in our CSS carousel container, I'm going to give it a width of, let's say, 1280 pixels. This is very important. In order to have this on different desktop and tablets and mobile, you need to basically use media queries that you modify this width depending on the screen width that you have, right? But for now, I'm gonna just hard code it to 1280. Just to show you, and I'll give you a margin of, let's say, 50 pixel and auto, and let's give it a background of CCC so you can see how it looks for now. I'm going to just give it a min height of 200 pixel so that it's visible. So this is going to be the carousel container. And then the next thing I want to do, I want to style my cards, right? So I'm just going to say card container. You can always, you know, make it more specific by adding the master class here, carousel container, in case you had other card containers in your page. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to give it a width of, let's say 200 pixel and height of let's say 250 pixel, right? Let's give it a background of maybe something, let's give it a border so that it's even better visible. So let's say 1 pixel solid and maybe AAA. So you can see that now we have one, but if I multiply it by, you know, duplicate it multiple times, you'll see that we're going to have multiple of them. Now we want to make sure that these are aligned horizontally. And the way to do that is pretty simple. Now in my carousel container, so let's say carousel container and the track, which is the parent container of all these card containers, I'm just going to make sure that the display is flex. So now you can see that they are justify it just like that. So now if I go ahead and add many more cards, so let me just copy this and paste it multiple times, you will see that it doesn't really care about the width that we defined. Because we set it to display flex, it tries to adjust them in terms of width so that all of them are visible within our area of the track, and that is not what we want. So in order to do that, I just need to make sure that the flex shrink on the card containers is 0, right? So now you can see that it actually considers the width that we have defined over here. So each of these card containers have a width of 200 pixels. Now, the reason why I added card container is because between each cards, I have to have a space of, let's say, 15 pixels, right? And in order to do that, I can easily come here and say padding right 15 pixel, right? And then you could see that it actually added the 15 pixel to the whole width. In order to fix that, you could see the difference, right? If I remove this, you'll see that it's like this. If I add the padding, you'll see that it adds this extra padding to the width of the card container. So I can just say box sizing, border box, and now you can see that it actually adds the padding within the width, right? So the width will always, regardless of the padding, will be 200 pixel. Now just to show you how it looks, if I now style my card, so carousel container, now card container, and then my card, I'm just going to give a width of 100 pixel, height of 100 pixel as well, and let's give it a background red so that it gets visualized. So you can see that there is a 15 pixel right padding, or the 15 pixel space between all the cards, right? So now what I'm going to do is just change this color to something like, let's put it like let's give it a border actually. Let's give it a border of 1 pixel solid and CCC. I'm going to go ahead and remove the background color that we gave to the container. Now it's like that. And also I'm going to remove the border that we added for the visualization purpose. Now you can see that we have our cards, and between each card there is a 15 pixel space. Now as you can see, it just went all the way outside of the boundary of our carousel container. To be able to fix that, we can set the overflow to hidden. And now you will see that it basically caught, kind of masked the area using the carousel container. And you can see that now it doesn't look pretty okay because we don't see the bottom over here. To fix that in my card, I can also add box sizing border box, right? Just like that. And now you can see that we also see the border underneath. So now that we have this, let's say like right now it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a half, 7 over here. Let's say we only want to visualize 5 elements visible in our container. To be able to do that, we already know the width, the parent width over here. So I can bring up my calculator. So I'm just gonna bring the calculator over here so that you can see. Since we want to have only 5 elements, I can say 1280 divided by 5, right? So this is going to be 256, and that would be the width that I will give to my card container. So I'm just going to say 256 pixel, and now you can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements visible in the page. So that's a calculation you need to do to be able to fix the width. And if you have this on a different, like in a tablet, you also need to make sure you consider, by using media queries, you consider the correct width for both the carousel container and for the width of the card container, right? So now the next thing I would like to do is add the next and the prev buttons over here. So I will just come outside of the track within the carousel container. I'm going to add a class nav, a div with class nav, and then I'll define, let's say, a div with class previous. Let's just choose buttons instead. So button with class previous, and then I'm gonna have a button with the class next, right? If you want to follow like how Google has, for example, these circles over here and one over here, what we can do is we can style these a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, for now, I'm just going to say prev and next so that we can see what we have over here. Now I can do nav and then button, since this is the style that we want to apply to both of these buttons. So I basically select the button. I'll give it a width of, let's say, for example, 60 pixel, right? And then height of 60 pixel, and then give it a border radius of 50%. So let's make sure that the border is something that we define, like let's say AAA. And for the next and previous icons, you could see I can go ahead in Google and search for material icons. Going to material design icons here, I can select arrow, search here for arrow. Scrolling down, I can see that there are multiple types of arrows. I can choose this one, for example. So I select this and copy the markup that I need over here. So going back to my uh, code, I can just say I remove this and paste that. So I have the next, and I'll do the same thing for the prev, right? Just like that. The only thing is that this right, I will make it left. But also we need to have the link to the styles of these icons. And to be able to get that, I go to the instructions, search for link in the page, and here's the link I can use to have my styles correctly in the page. So in my CSS, I'm going to go ahead here, say import URL, and then paste that URL. So now you can see that we have, okay, so there's something wrong here. We need to make sure that this is like this. So now you can see that we have our next and prev. The next thing, we want to align them, right? So to be able to do that, I'm going to make sure that the position is absolute on the buttons. Um, as you can see, absolute. And then I'll make sure that the top, because we want both of them to be centered vertically, right? So I'm just going to say top 50%. The next thing I want to make sure is that since this navigation is within the parent container, I need to make sure that the position style is set here. I'm going to set it to relative. Now you can see that it's kind of started to become centered. The only thing I need to do is use transform translate Y and then minus 50%. So this will actually uh, put it right in the center vertically, right? So this is the style that we have. Now, for the prev, I can do nav and then prev. Because I know the width, which is 60 pixel, it's easy as setting the left to minus 30 pixels, so half of the width. And then I can do the same thing for the next. But this time I will choose right because it's supposed to be on the right, right? So you can see that it's kind of centered right here and centered right here. Now you can see that because we set the overflow on the carousel container to be hidden, it kind of hides the other parts of this element as well. And to fix that, it's actually an easy fix. I just need to make sure that I put the track. So I'm just going to copy the track from here. I'm going to define another div with class carousel inner maybe, and then I put the track inside that carousel inner. And now instead of assigning overflow hidden to the carousel container, I can easily come and assign it to the carousel container and then carousel inner. So carousel inner. And then here I can assign the overflow hidden. Now you can see that it pretty much shows the buttons because now the only thing that gets caught is the track containing the cart containers, and now we can see our buttons. Now you can see that this here is not exactly aligned, and the reason is because when we designed, when we calculated the width here, we had to actually consider the padding a little bit. We know that there is a 15 pixel padding over here. So if I spread it out within these, since we have 5 elements, if I add these and become 61 pixel, you can see that it kind of tries to align it, but because of the um, because of the calculation, if I set it to 59 pixel, now you can see that the elements are correctly, the sort of the card containers are having correct width, which spans sort of correctly within our carousel container and the track. So now the next thing I would like to do maybe is to give the card a little bit of a border. So border radius 5 pixel. So now we have a sort of a border radius. We can even make it bigger if you want. Depends on your design, how you want to see it. And also you can increase, for example, the height of it. The next thing I would like to just showcase here is that within the card, I want to have a space for the image, and also I want to have a space for the info. Let's just put title 1 on the first card, and then let's just put number 1 on IMG, right? So basically you can add anything here, a text, an image as a background. For example, the way they have it in the Udemy, these are like background images, for example. The same thing for the case where I searched for movies 2018 on the Google website, right? So now let's say we have this. I want to make sure that I have enough area for the image, and also I want the title to be down here. To be able to style that, what I can do is card and then everything on the first level inside the card, which I denoted with this. And that is basically the IMG and info, right? Um, I can go ahead and make sure that the card itself has a display flex. So display flex. Now you can see that it likes this, but I want the direction of the flex to be a column, not a row. For example, in the case of this in the track, if you look at the track, we have defined display flex, and by default the direction is row, so they kind of aligned like this, but I want this one to be column. So here in the card, what I can do is set the flex direction to be column, right? And now with this selector, which selects the IMG and info, I can just say flex 1, right? So that it ends up over here. Now I want to make the title or the class info a little bit smaller. So I can do card and then info. I can make sure that the flex basis is, let's say, 40 pixel. And then I want to make sure that the flex grow is 0. So it doesn't grow anymore. It's going to be 40 pixel. Otherwise, you could see that when we define flex 1, it actually adds flex shrink and flex grow to 1, and it kind of sort of grows to compensate for the space that we have within here. So now we have the title. What I can do, I can give it a padding of 10 pixel, for example, and use box sizing to be border box. So now it kind of aligned. We can even give it a background of something darker, like maybe 333, and then give it a color of FFF. So now you can see that we have our title over here. Now to kind of fix it for the IMG as well, I want this one to be centered over here. What I can do is I also can say card and then info and use again display flex for this, and then use justify content to align this horizontally to be center, and use align items to be centered vertically, right? Oh, by the way, I did it for info. Let's do it for IMG. So now you can see that the text over here, we can also make sure that we have a big font size, let's say 30 pixel. So that is going to be how we basically create our image section and the title section. I can go ahead and copy and paste, for example, this card almost 9 times in the other ones. So I'm just gonna do it over here, change this to 2, this one to 2 as well, and the same for others. So this is going to be 3, and then this is going to be 3. And we can go on for all the cards and add them over there, right? Um, Let me actually do it because I'm going to show you a little bit of the JavaScript and interaction over here. So I'm just going to copy all these sort of elements. So I'm just going to choose the card over here, the card over here. I actually don't know how many cards do we have or how many cards I duplicated. So I'm just going to go up here. So we have 2. Let's make it 3, 4, 5, and 6. Do we have more? Yes, let's put 7 over here, and we have 8, which is good. So now we can see that 1, 2, 3, okay. Mistake. So I'm just going to quickly fix this. 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8, and then this one will be 9, and that's about it. And you can see that we only see 5 over here. Now, in order to make it work, what I can do is making sure that the buttons that we have defined over here has a cursor pointer. You can always add different effects on hover, for example, changing the size or, the color. Now, the only thing I need to do is have a reference to my buttons. So I can say const next. I'm going to hide the CSS for now. Const next document.query selector, and then I can have my next class, and then the same for the previous. I always like to have a logical ordering in my mind, so I will put the prev before the next and make sure the class is prev. Then I need to have a reference to the track, and the track is the one that we move left and right to basically show the other elements. So I can use the track, and then here I can do the track. But also I need to have a reference to the carousel container itself, because that's where we have defined the width that we have. And based on that width, we can basically move back and forth. So what I can do, I can have a reference to the carousel container as well. So I'm just going to say carousel container, and in this section, I'm just going to say carousel container, making sure that I typed it correctly, carousel container. And now the amount that we want to basically move the track is the width of this carousel container, right? I can even say carousel width like this. And then here I can just get the offset width of this over here. Now I can add an event listener to my next add event listener. So basically when I click on the next button here, I'm using ES6 for the function. Now I can just say track dot style dot transform, and then I'll use the object literals in ES6 to apostrophes translate x. And since when we press next, we want the track to move to the left, what we can do is use minus, and then I'll use dollar sign and then brackets to include this carousel width. And then I just need to say in pixels, right? So now if I press next, you will see that it shows the remaining elements. So for example, in the Google and here, when you press next, it actually has a transition. We can add that transition as well over here. The way we're going to do it is on the track that we have over here. I just need to say transition. Since we only uh, use the transform, I can say transition transform and maybe 0.3 seconds, which is 300 milliseconds. So now, if I show you what happens when I press next, you'll see that we have these cool, and you can play with the timing to make it different, for example. And I can use the same thing for the prev. So I can use prev, and I want to make sure that this becomes 0 pixel, right? So now we are here. If I press next, you can see that it scrolls, shows the remaining items. And then if I press previous, it's going to default to previous. So if right now I didn't talk about if we had many other items, I only just translate one time the track by the width of the carousel container. If you have watched my previous carousel episodes, you can figure out how I use, for example, an index, and I kind of, for this case, I need to know how many items do I have, and based on that, I can just translate accordingly. But for this tutorial, I think this is enough. It was great content that I could put in this time. Tomorrow, I'm going to wrap this up, for example, to make sure that we have a working carousel regardless of the number of elements that we have. And also we're going to hide the prev and the next, for example, depending on which sort of section we are in our carousel. For example, when we press here, maybe we want to hide the next because there is no next anymore. And when we are in the initially here, we want to hide the previous here. And we're going to tackle this in the next episode. And then after that, I got a request that we want to have a carousel that works with the touch events on the mobile phone. So I have already done that in one of the projects that I worked on. But I'm going to show it later, and stay tuned because after this series, we're going to tackle the series about having the overlays, right? So for example, just to give you a clue, if you take a look at this, when I refresh the page, you have this pretty cool effect over here. The same thing, for example, on this one. So you have this pretty cool effect over here, and we're going to dive deep into how to create many of these overlay effects on images. Stay tuned. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and do. And I wish you a great day and night. See you next time. Goodbye.